So it is now my pleasure to introduce our featured speaker, Mayor Tim Keller. Mayor Keller, before you arrived, I do want you to know that I did spend about 30 minutes just praising you and talking, and you missed it. You missed it, but we're done. Since taking the office in 2017, Mayor Keller has worked to support Albuquerque's business community through very, very challenging times, including the pandemic. Under his leadership, the city has focused on initiatives ranging from infrastructure improvement, workforce development, and small business support. His administration has worked to streamline city processes for businesses while supporting entrepreneurs and established companies that truly form the backbone of our Albuquerque economy. Today, he's going to share his perspective on Albuquerque's economic landscape, upcoming priorities and opportunities for continued partnership between city government and the business community. Please join me in welcoming Mayor Tim Keller to the stage.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you so much, Dell and the Chamber. And also, congratulations to the new board members. And obviously, some familiar faces, some new faces, and a wonderful leadership team that I know is going to guide this organization for the next year. Now, I think I want to begin a little bit by starting out, I was thinking about what the Chamber has been up to for the last 10 years. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that, because I think now we're at a point in many ways throughout our community, but also at the Chamber and even at the city. We've got a lot of new folks, whether it's new board members, new businesses, even new elected officials. And when I say new, meaning, in the last 3 or 4 years. And as I reflected on that, of course, I started out by thinking about, when I first came in, the Chamber actually acknowledged and straight away said, hey, Mayor, there are some deep problems in Albuquerque. Now, this was a long time ago. This was before the Now Times. And the Chamber was like, look, we have had generational issues that have been holding us back for crime fighting and holding us back on how we help our unhoused community. That might sound fresh and current, but it is also exactly what Terry and her board told me back in 2017. Now, when you think of that we were in difficult times then, and then you layer in everything that's happened nationally, especially recently with the overall national increases in crime and homelessness, the challenges coming out of the pandemic, you have this layered issue in Albuquerque that these are tough times. They were tough times in the first place for our city. And then you throw in all these national problems, and they just got harder. That is where we're at today. Now, I made a decision, which may have been the wrong or right decision, that we should actually try and work on some of these generational issues. Some of these issues that I think had been avoided for several years beforehand and essentially have been holding our city back. And so I said to the Chamber in my first speech, because I looked it up, that we were going to try and do the real work to address long-term structural challenges for Albuquerque, especially around crime and homelessness. That is word for word from 2018, like January or something like that. Now, so here's, I think, first what I heard is the Chamber said, you need to fix APD. And I'll talk about where APD was at that point. The Chamber also said, you got to do something different downtown. Every mayor's kind of tried the same thing, and it's helped, but it hasn't really made a long-term difference. The Chamber also said, hey, you need to fix that anti-housing zoning code that has been limiting our growth for so long. The Chamber said, you got to step up and finally own the issues around homelessness and stop pointing fingers to nonprofits and churches and asking them to do it. These were all Chamber messages 10 years ago. I also remember, people saying you should do something big that all New Mexicans would know about. So hold those questions in your mind for a little bit, because they were your questions. That's what the Chamber said. And believe it or not, I actually listened, and I tried to learn from what you all had been studying. In that era, there were a host of trips that had been taken to other cities. There were white papers that had been written. It was like a blueprint on what to do as mayor. And actually, it was amazing. And, you know, I actually looked at that and I said, okay, we're going to try and do the real work that we've desperately needed. And even though it's going to be tough, we're not going to study anymore. We're not going to do a pilot project. We're not going to spend several work group sessions and charrettes on a vision statement because it was already done. That work had been done by the community in general. And that includes everyone that the chamber works with, whether it's county government or state government or our legislators, city council. There was broad consensus about the same things that I just mentioned and what we had to focus on. So we decided to actually try and work on that. Now the challenge, of course, is that what we have seen just in the last year is we are finally addressing in a meaningful way some of those massive issues. It has taken a long time. It has taken real investment. We are all impatient. We are all frustrated with what we see outside on our streets when we go shopping or when we go to work, or what we see sometimes in our morning when we wake up and we look outside in our front lawn. The difference is now Albuquerque is going in a vastly different direction in a sense of how our city will look and feel and function for the next generation. So let's start with APD. You know, our chief is here, and he doesn't always like it when I remind folks of this, but 10 years ago, our department was falling apart, and that is not an exaggeration. We were under the consent decree for the right reasons because we were doing terrible things to our population that we were not supposed to do. Officers were demoralized. They were leaving in droves. There was no steady leadership at APD. And we also had a technology crime-fighting platform that was totally antiquated. You didn't get any speeding tickets because we didn't have radar cameras in any of our cars. You didn't see a helicopter flying overhead during the summer because it couldn't fly when it was hot outside. Our department was falling apart, make no mistake. So here is what we tried to do. We said we've got to actually rebuild a department that can function and have a fighting chance to keep us safe in Albuquerque. And so first, with respect to the CASA, it has been a long road, but eventually we pulled discipline out of the chain of command of the chief. We put it in charge of civilians, and we met 276 requirements from the federal government, and today we are out of the CASA, something no one thought we would actually accomplish. And I have to give the chamber some credit. They stuck with it in the first place for the right reasons when it was controversial, but they also held us and our feet to the fire to get it done, right? And I remember 3 years ago, and we were going backwards on the CASA process, and rightfully so, you all let me have it. And you said, we better get the ship straight. And that's actually when Chief Medina came in, and that's when we started doing things different. That's when we started running 4 academies at the same time. That's when our officer ranks started to grow again, and now we're up 20% in terms of our number of officers, and we actually have high morale again in our police department, and now we're attracting folks from outside of the state, all around the country, to work for APD because we're a role model when it came to police reform. It's hard to believe where we've come in 10 years on that front. Now, we have a long way to go, and that's never lost on me, and I'm going to talk about that, especially with crime fighting. But there can be no mistake that the department has been rebuilt in a way also that will last long after myself or the chief, because it now is capable of holding itself accountable. That's what was missing before. So it's going to make mistakes. We're going to have problems. The difference is they're going to actually fix them. And they're also going to make sure that people are held accountable, and they're not going to need the DOJ to tell them how or when to do that. They're going to do it on their own. So for us, when we think about, too, how the department was set up in terms of actually trying to fight crime, our answer 10 years ago was always we need more officers. And we do. We always need more officers. And thank goodness, whether it's the sheriff's office or the DA's office, that we actually work really well together to deal with the amount of resources that we have and make the most out of them. But we said that we can't wait a couple of years ago. We said that we've got to fight crime a different way. And so we decided to make 2 bets. One was on technology, and the other one was on civilians. And so here's what's happened. Again, we built from scratch a technology crime-fighting platform. And it was also from a chamber trip to several other cities when we realized that other cities have gunshot detection everywhere, and they have speed cameras that give you tickets, 80,000 of you in the case of Albuquerque. or they've got license plate readers. And technology is helping officers keep our city safe, but also not taking officers' time, so it's also freeing them up to do police work. And so this is what we started to build. And now, over 20% of Albuquerque, we have a crime-fighting technology platform that has literally changed how we police in Albuquerque. And so for us, when it comes to technology, I want you to consider this example. Before, when there was a shooting in our city, when someone was literally shot, there was only about a 50% chance that we would catch you. This is what's known as the clearance rate, and there's some nuances with respect to like how it's calculated, but in general, that was true up until a couple of years ago. Now, all of a sudden, here's what happens. There's a shooting. We know where it happens within 40 feet because of ShotSpotter and the gunshot detection technology. Then our officers come and we run the shell casings through the NIBINS database and we find out who owns the gun, who bought the gun, if the gun was stolen, if it was used in other crimes. Then we turn on the cameras in the area because we know exactly when the gunshot happened. And then we say, okay, there's 4 blue sedans in the area at the same time. And so then, all on camera, within minutes, we're following 4 blue sedans all over the city. Then we're reading their license plates. Then we find out where they live. And then we show up at their house and we arrest them. Our arrest rate now, if you shoot someone, is 99% in this city. That is improvement for APD. Now, we see this on the civilianization front too, because we need officers to be able to do that investigative work, use that technology. And so part of that is making sure that they're not doing things that a civilian could do. That's why at traffic scenes, you don't see cops anymore. You see public service aides. We've quadrupled the number of public service aides so that they can do things like monitor traffic and collect evidence at crime scenes, and also ride our buses, and also help us keep everyone safe at public demonstrations and community events, so that officers are freed up to actually fight crime. And the biggest example of this is, of course, our community safety department. Now, I've talked to you about this department in the past. The difference is, just like this technology, everything I've told you was not working in concert and in coordination until about 9 months ago. Our community safety department now runs 24/7. And that department has taken 100,000 calls that APD did not have to take, freeing up officers to fight violent crime. That's civilianization. By the way, of course, they're also trying to provide real help in a way that's meaningful for people with behavioral health and mental health and transport needs that APD cannot do. So it's helping on both ends of the equation. And we are the only city in America that has a 24/7 full-service alternative to 911 emergency response in the country. That is a great thing for Albuquerque. That is the kind of change that you asked for 10 years ago, and it is finally up and running on our streets every day and every hour of the day. Now, when you put all this together, I want to give you a couple of other examples, because you mentioned even things like auto theft. You know, here again, for 10 years, we were the worst in the country for auto theft. Well, now we're the 8th worst. That's where we're at. We know what we're doing, we're making progress, but yes, we have a long way to go. That is absolutely true. I'm going to give you one other technology example. Just yesterday, there was a robbery at a Walgreens, and it was the first time that APD utilized marked money. So this is money with GPS tracking in it. And so we were able to actually follow and eventually catch. It was a dangerous situation, but we were able to catch those perpetrators because we used this whole notion of marked money to follow people who steal money. This is modern crime fighting, and it is safer and it is more effective, but it's only over about 20% of the city. That's why we've got to have it over 100% of the city. We all deserve the same technology crime fighting that some parts of our city have, and that's why we've got to keep doing what we're doing. So here's what this means for you. There is a handout on your table. You don't have to look at it, but if you want to glance at it, I did just want to highlight, you can glance at these statistics. This is the chief's dashboard. He also hates it when I hand this out because it's not for the public, but I'm sharing it with you today. We look at this every week, every Monday, and here's what's changed. Crime, other than the COVID blips in Albuquerque, was going up for 10 years, until this year. Crime is down in every category for the first time in a decade. That is what that sheet shows you. That is what our new APD is capable of. Now, I know we've got a long way to go because it's coming down from an all-time high. So just like that auto theft stat that I shared with you, the difference is we're finally breaking through, and what we're doing is working, and we've got to keep doing it all over the city, and those statistics are the evidence behind it. So when we think a little bit about our challenges with respect to our unhoused community, this was another chamber lesson. My first trip as your mayor was with the Chamber of Commerce to San Antonio. Who was on that trip, by the way? Was it two of us? Three, maybe. Yeah, there were like three of us left. This is why I wanted to share with you this story, because even my predecessor had also been to San Antonio with the chamber. And the reason why we were all going to San Antonio is there was a slow train coming to Albuquerque. And it was the train of how do you deal with challenges around homelessness and around a housing shortage. And San Antonio had already been working on that, and we went there to study San Antonio. And let me describe what San Antonio has. It has a building that is part of a network of other buildings that provides both general and unique services to folks who are suffering from a lack of shelter. And it has components that are about housing vouchers and also about finding different opportunities for subsidized housing, but it also has a detox tank. It also has medical respite for folks who are coming out of surgery who have no home. It also has different things for men and women's, and it also has components where there are partners who are involved, and they're doing the same work around addiction and treatment. I don't know if that rings a bell to anyone. You may know that as the Gateway system, because that is actually what we got from San Antonio. It was that trip where everyone agreed that Albuquerque, for 10 years at least, had been avoiding this issue. Our answer 10 years ago when I went on that trip to someone who was unhoused was you should get on a bus and you should go to Joy Junction. Now, if you know where Joy Junction is, by the way, like that's a really hard bus ride, like no matter what. But let alone if you're dealing with a mental or a behavioral health issue. There was not a single person in the city of Albuquerque whose job it was to think about homelessness. Not one. There wasn't even one whose job it was to think about housing. Our city had 100% outsourced this challenge to the nonprofit sector and to the county and to the state and to everyone else. Our city actually would never own even a piece of this other than cutting a contract, maybe to support some of these great nonprofits. We didn't even have a single employee looking at it. So this is what we decided because it's what the chamber also mapped out. Number one, you have to build an institution to deal with this. We created the Health, Housing, and Homelessness Department. We now have a whole department working on this issue every day, which we should have had in the first place, but now we desperately need. And I'm so glad we set it up early because now we're actually starting to bear the fruits of it. Now the second thing is, we decided that we actually have to build the physical institutions to deal with these issues and the buildings where people can actually go to get help. And this was the foundation of the concept of the Gateway. It actually came from white papers from the chamber and from the housing community, and it came from role models in San Diego, Denver, and in San Antonio. And so it's taken a long time, I will tell you that. And I will also let you know that until about a year ago, the number of people that we housed with services for 24/7, year-round, who needed housing, unhoused folks that the city actually helped. You know what that number was? It was 0. We didn't do anything. We just paid nonprofits and others and hoped it would go away. That changed. We have now built the Gateway system. That is the other sheet on the other side of the crime page. And the Gateway system now has 5 different locations. We have 600 people living out at the west side 24/7, but they have access to services. We have a family gateway that is an old rundown hotel that we converted that now 100 families live in every night, including young children, and we get them to school and we get them to early childhood care. We also have now, for the first time, if you need to go somewhere, there's a choice besides the emergency room or jail for first responders. We have a 24/7 emergency drop-off at the Gateway Center. This was another gap that the chamber identified. It's the only one of its kind in the entire state of New Mexico. We needed that no matter what. We need it going forward no matter what. These are the big gaps that we're finally filling with the Gateway system. The other one is transport. Instead of taking a bus to Joy Junction, which is totally unrealistic, we now transport hundreds of people every day off the street into our shelters where they have a chance at help. and a chance at not going back onto the street, and a chance at housing. And that is also because of the Community Safety Department. They transport dozens of folks off the street every single day now. None of this was happening in concert a year ago. So this is new. The Gateway system is up and running, and now tonight it will take care of 1,000 people. We went from 0 to 1,000. And just like crime, we have a long way to go. There's about 5,000 unhoused on our streets. I know that. But I also know we've built a system that has a fighting chance to actually help those people going forward. That's the difference in today's Albuquerque. That's how we're set up for the next generation. Now, when we think about this system, we also want to acknowledge there's all sorts going on around it. And look, I'm giving you examples of chamber problems that you gave me to solve. And I'm telling you, no problem is solved, but the difference is we are light years closer to an answer of some kind than we were 10 years ago. But it also has to do with policy issues. With City Council's help, we have totally transformed our housing and zoning rules to actually try and have houses so our rents aren't as high and we can have workforce again to actually work at everyone's companies. We have a 20,000 housing shortage. The difference is now you can have casitas, you can have duplexes, you can build 4 stories. There's all sorts of options. You can convert hotels into apartments. And maybe with everyone working together, we're going to get that Wells Fargo building converted into mixed-use housing. And what we have done in total is we have added 5,000 units of housing in partnership in the last 4 years with the private sector. That is double any administration had ever before. But here again, we need 15,000 more. But we know what we're doing. We got the zoning code fixed, and now it's all about funding. Funding is the only limiting factor to housing at this point. And when I say housing, it's all types of housing. Just like at the Gateway system, you can't have one solution. That's what we learned at San Antonio. You have to have a solution for people who are having their own individual issues. Some it is a job. That's why we have the Better Way Forward program again, and that's why literally picking up trash and keeping downtown clean and watering the plants are 20 people who are living in the Gateway system. That's the Better Way Forward program. That's what we're doing. We have to have at least 10 answers to these big problems because one answer is just not going to cut it. And that goes for housing, and that's also what is behind the design and the concept of the Gateway. That's why we have pallet homes now, out where I got my driver's license when I was a kid at the old DMV. Now there's 50 people living there recovering from addiction. And I met one of them at the farmer's market on Saturday. And he was like, hey, thanks. I'm living at the Recovery Gateway. And I was like, the what? Where? And then he was like, you know, in the little pallet homes. And I was like, oh my goodness. He was number 9, the 9th person, because it just opened, to live there. Then we have the Sobering Center. The Sobering Center and these other components inside the Gateway, these specialty components, they all either just started opening in the last few weeks or the last few months or are going to open in August, like our teen Gateway, which is for young adults because we have hundreds of young adults who are unhoused. That's going to be the old San Mateo Inn, another hotel that we're converting. So that is the Gateway system. That is honoring the request that you made to do the real work and to have the determination not to give up or not to let a particular neighborhood say, you can't do this here. Because this is what Albuquerque needs, and it's also what it needs going forward for the next generation. So I want to touch a little bit on our economy and on built environment. I'm going to look at the time because I know we have a schedule and we want to do Q&A. So we're going to get to that. So just a little bit about where we're at. We know that we are no different than every other city when it comes to economic development and the pains that we're feeling with respect to the transition of international policy with respect to things like China and tariffs. And what I'm saying by that is, you may remember we were going to be the manufacturing hub of solar panels for North America. That was a done deal until tariffs and China, and they all pulled out. And I think you know about this out at Mesa del Sol. But you know what? Our city has been through this before. Almost every 4 years, our economic development mission has to match what's happening federally. And so we are in the process of doing 2 things economic development-wise. Number 1, focusing on you, making sure that all the incentives and all the efforts are about expanding local business. Because in these tough times when we're not getting huge companies to move here from out of the country, we've got to grow our own. And so we're back to investing in JTA programs and our LEADA programs, and we've now actually created 1,000 jobs by just supporting local companies with like 10 more jobs. So it's back to that old-fashioned increment of one economic development approach. But that's what we need, because right now we can actually control that, right? I can't control what happens with tariffs and things like this. And so that's part of our focus. Of course, we're also regrouping with Kirtland Air Force Base and with Sandia Labs in terms of what we're doing that is in step with now federal investment. And of course, that mostly has to do with satellites and directed energy. And that's why now those are the companies that are knocking on our door. But part of economic development is also place-based. And part of that is downtown. This is another example where the chamber, and I appreciate that you moved downtown and you stayed downtown and you're not giving up on downtown. Neither is anyone else, but I will tell you, the problem with downtown, in many ways, I think has been government. Government has been looked to for the answer, especially the mayor. You name what the project is, it's a one-off city project, and it has never been sustainable. I say that, being someone who's born and raised here. I think there were lots of great efforts. I mean, look, you all saved downtown in the 90s, like that first round with Alvarado Transport Station and so forth. That's why we still have a downtown to build on. But at the end of the day, I said, we're going to do something different. We are going to let go of the political power and the ownership of downtown, and we are going to give it to downtown. How refreshing is that? Now, here's what this means. What is that actually, what comes from a mayor, what comes from city council in terms of downtown? There's actually only two things. Control, and that has to do with cleanliness and hours of regulation and events and things like that. And then money. So I said, you know what? You can have your money back. So we created the tax increment district downtown. That now mathematically means $200 million just for downtown. Council supported it. I hope the rest of the community will continue to get behind that. It took a state law change. But that now we're going to set up a governance structure of what we're going to do with that $200 million. But the point is it's going to include the community. It is not going to be an apparatus of the mayor's office. We, as downtown folks, you all are going to decide what happens with that money. And that's the way it should be. That's part of the reason why we've been held back for so long. The other aspect is around how to run downtown. And that's where the business improvement district comes. You know, we tried that before, but the city and the government entities weren't really a part of that. It was just the private businesses. And it was always kind of either competing or not in lockstep. And then there were also like, you know, I think everyone who remembers that era, there were challenges between businesses. Now we have a plan to have a downtown business improvement district where you can be in charge of downtown. And you can decide how the events work, how the space is activated, how you do different levels of subsidies to help create storefronts, to help have restaurants on sidewalks and in the street. This is going to, hopefully, I think, go to council for approval early this fall. So downtown will be in charge of itself in many ways. And I will tell you, back to the chamber, this was the #1 learning from, I think, at least a dozen trips to downtowns all across the country. They all have some form of a bid or a TID. And it's time we do too. So that is part of what we're doing, but we're also making sure that we're doing our part in that process. We're going to pay into the TID. We're going to pay into the bid because we're an owner of property downtown. But we're also going to make sure that we deliver on some other promises that no one has been able to deliver on before because they were just too hard. The rail yards. How many mayors have been up here talking about the future of the rail yards, including myself? That has also changed. The C&M Film Academy is opening this winter in the rail yards, the first major tenant that has had since it closed, and it is going to bring hundreds of students and professors downtown every day. That is what is different downtown. That is going to lift up downtown. Now, I also want to mention our other university. How many of you have been to Phoenix? Come on, a lot of us have been to Phoenix. I know you all have been to Phoenix. Okay. Phoenix is a powerful lesson for Albuquerque. You know, I'm just old enough to remember when Phoenix wasn't that much bigger than Albuquerque. I also have seen it boom, and I've seen what happened, but I also remember just 10, 15 years ago, its downtown looked exactly like ours. It was in a real tough spot. It was hanging on by a thread. Now, before the sports teams and all the stadiums, because that was part of it, but before that, what happened is Arizona State started buying up all those old office buildings. And Arizona State said, we are going to join downtown and lift up Phoenix and lift up Arizona. And so now we've been on multiple delegations and trips to Arizona to learn this with UNM. And we have an MOU with UNM to bring the Lobos downtown in a real way, right? To bring an actual school, a campus downtown. And that's what Arizona State did. That brings the professors and the students. It's like the same concept as CNM, but it's much bigger. And it's also much more permanent just because of the length of stay for students and the multi-year programs that they have. And so now we've narrowed it down to 3 locations. They're all around Civic Plaza, and we're negotiating the deal. And we're gonna get the Lobos in downtown Albuquerque for the first time ever. And that is also gonna transform downtown. So I hope with some of these examples, you've seen that we've tried to honor the request, the hard request, to actually work on a problem that takes some real time, takes some real effort, that's not just a press conference or a pilot project. And I also want you to know that we're never gonna forget that when it comes to helping our families. And so it could be smaller things, like the fact that when I came in, we didn't have a single drinking fountain that worked in a park. Now we have 70 that work. We didn't have any toilets in parks, and like everyone wants those, especially for athletic events. Now we have 20. We didn't have flushing toilets ever at the Balloon Fiesta. This year we're gonna have flushing toilets. So we care about the little stuff too. We wanna make sure whether it's things like adding speed bumps to your neighborhood because that's what you want, or it's making sure that we're also having more community centers and community spaces. You know, for the first time in 30 years also, we built 3 new community and multi-gen centers, 3 of them. We also have seminal parks in our city again, like Phil Chacon and Wells Park. And you know, those parks used to have a stereotype of something else. Now they are the best parks in the city, and that's what they should be. And people drive from all over Albuquerque to go down the incredible slide at Wells Park, which I highly recommend. Adults can take it too. And it's scary. Don't kid yourself. Get ready. And so we're gonna continue doing that, and the biggest example is, of course, the rail trail. You know, I remember, and a lot of you are here have given me ideas, so I always pick on Dale Decker. You know, he was talking to me about the rail trail or the string of pearls or all the different names that you had for this thing. And it was because the High Line was being built in New York, and every other city in America was building these amazing pedestrian parkways to connect us to each other, but in a way that didn't require a car. And to also be mixed use, affordable, but also fun and prospering opportunities in areas that were just warehouses and railroad tracks. And so that idea was there forever. The difference is we're finally getting it done. So we are now gonna finish phase 1 of the rail trail, connecting Tigway Park to the Sawmill. And we're under construction for the big one at Central. There are 20 phases. We have a vision for this trail that was designed by Antoine Predock. He was his last design before he died. The vision is gonna tell us about us. It is 12 stops on a rail station, like stations on a rail line. And each station, through art and mixed media, tells us about our ecology, tells us about the indigenous communities around us, the coming of the railroad, the coming of Route 66, El Camino Real. That is going to be a powerful example of how we can do the same great things that we love in other cities, but doing it our way, a way that reflects who we are and reflects our culture. And so the rail trail is a 7-mile loop that every New Mexican will know about by the time we finish it. And we know this from every other city that's done it. These are now the most iconic destinations in almost every major city in America. And we're gonna have our own. We've just got to keep building it. So I'm gonna close with this. And then Terry, I'm right on time. So I think if you look on the horizon, you also see numerous things that point to a comeback for the city of Albuquerque. I'm not gonna talk about all of them, but when I list these, picture yourself in our city, checking out the fact that Uptown Plaza now has a new food court for the first time in 30 years, that Winrock has a shockingly cool lake and farmer's market for the first time in 30 years for anything, that we still have not given up on a stadium for the United, and as soon as that judge, I don't know what judge is, as soon as we get a ruling, we're all ready to go on that the Sunport is finally fixed up and set up for the next 20 years, that even the state is redoing the highways for the first time since I was racing on those highways to high school out at St. Pius. We see all around us evidence of a comeback. Even at Central and Unser, we see a food hall, we see a library, we see a new community town center at Atrisco. If you look at Los Altos Park, Wells Park, the parks that I mentioned, you see our older communities getting new investment. And you see even right down the street, we have First Street, the new arts and theater district that's connected to Villa Miriam across the street. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you have got to go. It is one of the most vibrant parts of downtown. And you also see crime finally going the right direction. And you see us having a system in a city that at least can hold the line and continue to help more people off our street each and every day. So I believe that in the end, when you think about the challenges that you gave me, the challenges that our city has had for decades, we have stayed focused on big issues. We've done the real work. We've tried to fix and build systems that will last well beyond myself or folks who are in leadership positions in this room. We've also weathered pandemics, protests, 2 governors, 2 presidents, but through it all, what you see now is we're tested, we are trusted to hold us together, and Albuquerque is making a comeback. Thank you so much, and God bless.